Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well and staying safe. I felt it was really important to create a video that looked at some of the basic facts around coronavirus and what's going on around us, but really to also draw attention to the fact that despite the contagion of coronavirus, which is affecting all of us around the world, there's also something really, really serious that also appears to be spreading, and that's the contagion of fear. There's so much scaremongering going on and also potential profiteering from certain people and individuals by spreading false news about the coronavirus and what it actually involves. So I thought it was actually really important to separate some of the fact from the fiction and to tell you essentially some of the basic facts that you need to be aware of. So first of all, why is the coronavirus a pandemic? What actually constitutes a pandemic? When on the 11th of March, the WHO, the World Health Organization, declared this a pandemic, what they meant by this was the sustained transmission of a virus capable of causing suffering, sickness, or death across a wide range of continents. And that's what the coronavirus qualified as being, as deemed on the 11th of March. Now, how is the coronavirus different to the flu? There's lots of questions about this, and there's some basic differences between the two. The most important one is actually the behavior of the virus. So with the influenza virus, which causes flu, because we've had it around for so long, we're able to predict a lot of its behavior and how many people will be affected, how it spreads within the population, and when it will naturally die off. With the coronavirus, it's a completely different virus that doesn't belong to humans. The only other place it's been found is in some animals, namely the bat, and we think that this is where it originated. But we don't understand how it got from bats to humans and how there may have been a potential intermediate host that carried the virus first. Why it got to us, we're not sure, and we are not the natural host for this virus. So as a result of that, the virus doesn't really know how to behave in us, and we don't know how this virus is going to behave. We can't predict its behavior, we can't predict what it's going to do, and we can't predict how it may potentially mutate. Now, normally in a natural host environment, the virus will mutate for the better in order to allow the host to survive. Because if the host dies, then actually the virus doesn't really benefit much from that. It needs the host to keep surviving in order to be able to keep using the host to spread the infection. So whether the virus, the coronavirus, is going to mutate for the better in us humans remains to be seen. It may not, but we're hopeful that it will, and we need to keep monitoring this in order to know more. The second major difference between the flu and the coronavirus is that we actually have vaccines against some of the major influenza viruses. We don't have a vaccine yet for the coronavirus. There's intensive research that's going on at the moment, but we think that we're a good at least several months away, if not a year, because with the development of any vaccine, it has to go through various different trials and tests in order to make sure that it's safe, in order to immunize the whole population against the virus. There's a third really important point and difference between the flu and the coronavirus, and that's how contagious it is. So a measure of how contagious a virus is something called the R0 by epidemiologists. So this is called the basic reproductive number. What does this mean? Well, it means that if you're infected by the virus, how many people can you potentially infect that you come into contact with? With the basic influenza virus, this number is 1. So that means if you have the virus and you meet several people, you are likely to transmit that to one person. With the polio virus, before the vaccine came in, this reproductive number, or R0, was actually 6. So that's quite a lot of people that you're capable of affecting if you have that particular virus. Again, this is before the vaccine came in. Now, where does the coronavirus lie in terms of influenza and polio? Well, it's somewhere in between. The actual R0 value, or reproductive number, for the coronavirus is 2.8. That's almost 3 people. So if you have the infection, then you are likely to spread it to 3 other people that come into contact with you. And you can imagine how this number starts escalating at an exponential level, because if you go on and infect 3 other people, each one of those is also capable of going on to infect 3 other people, and so on and so forth. And it carries on until eventually the virus spreads to the entire population. There's another difference as well, and that's in terms of symptoms. So if you have symptoms of the basic flu, That usually involves muscle aches, potentially a runny nose, a headache, sometimes a cough and a fever. With the coronavirus, there's a huge range of different symptoms. So someone could be completely asymptomatic, they don't have any symptoms at all, but yet they're a host and a carrier for the virus. Whereas on the completely opposite end of the scale, you could develop pneumonia and then something even more serious, which is generalized inflammation of your lungs. It's called ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome. This is where ITU help and ventilator help is needed, and potentially there's a risk of death with that. Now, for the majority of people, they're going to lie somewhere in between. They may be asymptomatic, but they may also get a fever, a persistent cough, or have trouble breathing. We know that the coronavirus, for some reason, tends to target the lower respiratory tract, so that's the lungs, and this is why shortness of breath or difficulty breathing is more common with the coronavirus than the common flu. So this is another major difference. Now, how are we targeting the coronavirus? What are we actually doing with our policies in order to try and prevent spread? Well, epidemiologically speaking, anytime there's a virus in the population, what we're trying to do is to limit the number of people who are exposed to the virus in order to limit transmission and spread. And we estimate that in order to be effective, we need to suppress transmission in about 66% of the population. So that's a huge number of people. Now, as the virus is within the population, what's also happening is that as people have it, they're also then developing immunity. And as more people get the virus, there's more and more immunity established within the community. This is called natural herd immunity, and it has a natural course through which it runs. The only way to sustain immunity is to wait for that phase to end, or to develop a vaccine that comes ideally sooner, so we're able to immunize the population against the virus. Now, the first method that we use to try and reduce transmission and protect the most vulnerable in our society, so that's the over 70s, that's pregnant women and those with underlying conditions, is called the mitigation phase. So we're trying to slow the spread of the virus. We're trying to flatten the curve. What does that mean? Well, it means reducing the number of people who were affected by the virus at any particular point in time. Why is that important? It's important because it reduces the burden on our NHS and our health resources so that we're able to cope, we're able to manage, and we're able to save lives. So that's what flattening the curve means. What we're also trying to do with the curve is to move it towards the summer months, when we're hoping, as the temperature changes outside, this virus may start to behave differently and will not be as potent as it is in the winter months. We don't know that that's going to be the case for sure, but we're hoping that it will be. So that's the mitigation part. What we've now moved into is complete suppression of the virus. So what we're trying to do is essentially suppress and prevent transmission of this virus to as many people as we possibly can, not just those who were deemed the most vulnerable. And that's because we're seeing huge numbers of cases and numbers growing and growing, whereby it may make it pretty much near to impossible for our health services to be able to cope. How do we achieve suppression? Well, it's through all the strict measures that we've already introduced or the government has had to implement. So that is essentially self-isolation, home quarantine, extreme social distancing, the closure of schools and university. It means everyone staying at home other than essential workers who are on the front line, who must be there in order to try and protect us from the virus, or people who were, for example, making sure that we have enough food supplies. So only these people are allowed to actually go and practice what they do. But even they must be returning home after their shift is done to try and limit the suppression. This is really serious because we know that even young people can be affected by this virus. They may seem asymptomatic, but they're natural hosts for the virus. And as a result of that, they can actually potentially spread it to many other people, including those who are most vulnerable in our societies. And we know that if you're young, if you have it, you are also at significant risk of getting quite substantial disease that could end up hospitalizing you. So it's super, super important that everyone follows this advice. As healthcare workers like myself, we don't have the luxuries of being able to self-isolate or socially distance unless in critical circumstances. We're there on the front line trying to protect everyone. So please, please do us a favor and stay at home and make sure that we try and gain control of this virus, because the sooner we do that, the more effective these measures are going to be, and the faster we're going to be able to win over this virus. I really hope that that's been helpful to you and has helped to distill some of the basic facts around what's actually going on and what we're doing and why we're undertaking these extreme strategies that we are. There's a lot of myths circulating around there. There's a lot of scaremongering. Please be careful with regards to the resources that you're using. Make sure they're from trusted places, trusted organizations, verified accounts, where you know that the people who are speaking to you or the sources that you're reading are credible and that you can count on them. Wishing you all to be safe, to be fit, to be healthy, and for this whole pandemic to be over as soon as possible.